Hello again, everyone. Mike Lowe here, and we are in the 2022 season. And I wanted just to give you a quick checkup on how the slider set has been going for me. I am ahead of maybe a lot of you watching this video who may be starting off a new franchise or maybe in the midst, kind of re-examining things. And I figured it would help just to kind of see how things are going. Right off the bat, you can see I'm the line still. We're 1-4, so it's probably about where you'd expect to be with this team a little bit, especially just me kind of keeping it pretty close to the vest, a little conservative on the rebuild, just not wanting to kind of force too much. I talked about in some previous videos about really just kind of playing the market a little bit, not over committing to anything long term. And I did that, and it's not really gone as well as I thought. But again, that's okay. Kind of have a pretty good plan in place with this team here. But the whole idea here is just really just to kind of show you like what do I do here? When do I start changing things? What am I looking at each week in a particular franchise? And unfortunately, the more I've this weekend, I've actually been playing a little bit of Madden '08 on the PC. Some guys over at, to give a quick plug, a website called footballidiots.com. That's right, footballidiots.com. They have done some amazing work, really just over the years revamping Madden '08. And boy, it really tells me how much is missing from the current Madden franchise. It's remarkable. Of course, the Madden gameplay here probably a big step up as you'd hope after all these years, but boy, there's a lot missing. But still, there's stuff to go through. There's things that I go through each week. And guys, at the end of the day, it's a game. I don't lose sleep over it. I'm not fretting. I know a lot of people are upset at where it's at. I am too, but I mean, it's just a game, guys. So I wouldn't let it beat you up too much. If you're having fun with it, that's okay. You don't have to. I get so many questions in the slider thread about like, hey, is it okay if I change this? Like, yeah, it's your game. Do whatever you want. Like, you don't need my approval for anything. So those are just kind of guides. It's more or less how I'm playing. It's kind of what I feel is most realistic, but hopefully, again, that is just a helpful guide there. And the sliders themselves, of course, are up on operationsports.com. So let's just go ahead and take a look and go through just kind of where I really start, where I just advanced, we just lost. And one of the very first things I will do, I'm actually going to talk about last, but I will kind of go in and maybe look at particular, changes to the gameplay sliders and so on. But after that, because I want to talk about that at the end of the video here. I really just go in and just kind of look around the league a little bit, and you can go into this as much as you want, but I'm kind of letting these graphics scroll here. So I'm looking at my yards per game, or my yardage. We're 30th in passing yards, 13th in rushing yards for DeAndre Swift. So we're having a lot of success running the ball. Again, receiving's been kind of hot and cold. We've had just I don't want to say drops to mislead you. We've had a lot of drops because I've thrown into coverage too much. It's not about like, oh, I need to increase the catching. It's nothing like that. It's just guys just aren't getting open. We're just not still a very good passing team. I don't have a very good quarterback. My receivers are like my 1 and 2 guys are really guys that are probably more like 2, even 3 guys on most other teams. So it's a struggle. It's just hard to get dudes open, and so there are drops. Hawkinson's been hurt and so on. Over here you can see points scored 31st. So there's someone actually worse than us this year. Points allowed ninth, very, very early, just 5 games. But offensive yards dead last. That's been kind of a theme for me with this Lions franchise. Defensive yards seventh. So we're up to a pretty good defensive start. I think some of that's me just playing safety. I do give up some big plays, but I'm also able to kind of shut down some stuff that I think the AI is maybe relying on a little bit too much. So your mileage will vary depending on what position you use. I don't use defensive linemen. I've had a lot of people ask that. I did way back in the day, kind of like OG Madden player, but I converted. You could say I've like my playing style has slimmed down. I started as a defensive lineman, I went to a linebacker, and now I'm at a safety. So maybe one day I'll be a cornerback or something. But that's just where I play. After kind of looking at that, I just like to look at kind of where things are going. I especially look to see is like, ooh, are there any of these players of the week guys that I played? They weren't for this week. But again, you see a lot of standout stats here. So if you kind of have a wonky week, it doesn't mean anything's wrong. It's just, Jesus, I mean, things happen, right? So I just like to look around at that. And of course, you can go in and look and you can start to dive around and look at some of this stuff. I've mentioned a million times on streams before, but one stat you just want to be careful about is this one, fumbles recovery. These are all multiples of 2 unless it's in a played game. So if you're thinking, well, I have the Bills and there's an odd number, it's because I played the Bills and I had a fumble. In an actual played game, those are counted properly, ×1. Every simulated fumble recovery is a ×2. It has been like this with Madden for 4 years. I don't know why they won't change it. it's frustrating and quite frankly stupid that it hasn't been updated. So just be careful of that. But you can get a lot of information here. You can kind of see how your defensive sacks are. I think as long as you're not hovering around the top too much, that's probably good. You can see we're kind of towards the bottom where you'd expect maybe a team like us to be. So there's just little things. It really just depends what you're looking for. I've had a lot of people say, it's impossible to get penalties in Madden. Well, not last. So it's not completely impossible. And I did mention I played the Bills. That plays a role. And I just lowered in the most recent slider set. I actually just lowered one of the penalty sliders there. So again, just something there. Whatever you'd want to look at. Of course, you can go in. I like to look at just kind of like overall, and you can see how bad golf's been for me this year. 7 touchdowns, 6 picks. But I will look at a lot of just kind of like metric stuff here. I mean, as much as you can, there's not a lot to look at, but like, for instance, like yards per average, like if your dude's at like, like who's the highest starter here? Trey Lance in my particular franchise. 9, if you have we have 3 guys who are over 9 that are starters. If your guy's at like 14, I mean, you're probably creating way too much separation. So you probably want to tighten up the coverage, maybe lower pass blocking, that sort of thing, even catching, QB accuracy. There's 1,000 things you could probably adjust there that would help with that. So again, you can go in here and just kind of look at just various things. Yards per average is a really, really good one to sort for quarterbacks, just to kind of see how your play is lining up. Another one that I'm struggling with, I mentioned there's tons of drops. So my completion percentage is really low. For major starters, I should say, we're the lowest. But again, it's not too far off. And if I just start eliminating some of these stupid throws I keep making, it's not too far off. We're around kind of guys you'd expect to see maybe Jared Goff playing on a bad team would be. So again, it's not like he's at like 45% or something. So it's not completely terrible. For rushing, I like to look a lot at broken tackles. Again, you just want to make sure, unless maybe you are a Christian McCaffrey or you're a Derrick Henry, you just want to make sure that you're not like smoking the rest of the league in this stuff. DeAndre Swift's up there. And the other thing you can look at with broken tackles is the actual amount of carries, right? So like who else has 13 or 12 carries? Or I should say broken tackles, and then you can look and see how many carries they have. So like David Montgomery is pretty much exactly the same as DeAndre Swift. So again, looks pretty good there. Of course, you can look at average, and again, nothing here is really standing out. So that's good. And so you get the idea, right? There's little stats you can look at. Average per reception obviously is a big one. Just making sure that you don't have like 3 dudes in the top here. Jason Kabinda, look at that, 1 catch for 14 yards. But the idea is you don't have a dude who has like 65 catches and he's got run after average. I should be looking here. Where am I going? Average here. You want to make sure, like AJ Brown, right? So 19.9, that's really high, but it's just 20 receptions. If you have 2 dudes who are like at 18 and a half and 19 and a half, and it's like towards the end of the season, now you're getting way too much separation again. So very similar to the yards per attempt with quarterbacks. Those are things you can lower. Keep in mind that not all of your players will show up for some stupid reason again in Madden. They will not always show up. So like 7.5 is the sack leader. But if I went to my team, and I'm not even sure the AI teams might have this problem too, but you might not see your guys. Like Trent McDuffie, who's our 2nd round pick, he's has the most on our team with 2 through 5 weeks. And I don't even know if he'll show up. Let's see. He might. It's really just hit or miss. It's just kind of a weird thing. Yeah, there he is. So he is showing up. So, but there are some stats here that won't show up. Of course, there's stats that won't ever show up in a played game. So you'll see all these lines with catches allowed 0. I, again, don't know why Madden can't or won't fix this. It's none other than just stupid, selfish reasons, period. Just not caring about these modes, especially after spending some time going through the old Madden 08 game. It's unbelievable what this franchise has dropped the ball with. Really sickening and disappointing, frankly. But yeah, that's it. So again, I'll go through that. Of course, it's really important. I don't read any of this garbage other than I click to the draft and see if there's any notes there. Same thing here. If you hold down L2 and click up, it'll take you to the draft. So I look at the notes there. It's still showing notes from last year's draft. Again, this is still, they updated this, but this is still just complete trash in this game. Their news network stuff is just garbage when you think about what ESPN 2K5 had, Madden 08 had. It's complete and utter disgrace. What's here with the new stuff is terrible. So, but nonetheless, it's what we got, and it's still an enjoyable game, I guess, at most times for me to play. So after I kind of go through all that, I go back to that task list, right? I'm looking for players who maybe want to renegotiate. There's nobody really here that I'm jumping in line to renegotiate. We got Jerron Reed on just kind of a 1-year deal, which is all I wanted. Jamal Williams, I like a lot, but he's kind of getting up there, and it just isn't really has a big role, as much of a role as he had. So I'm certainly not going to be paying him $4 million a year. And Kareem Jackson, we won't be renewing. He's again just kind of a 1-year filler, as we didn't really get anything else going with safety. He's actually played pretty well for us. So again, I look at those, nothing really going on. I will wait a lot towards the end of the year, especially after the trade deadline, just to make sure I don't make any moves or anything like that. Another thing you can look at, speaking of moves, is just seeing if the AI is doing anything that's of interest to you. But typically, I'm just looking at trades and stuff like that. Don't see too many. Still don't see any trades during the draft, which is really immersion ruining. Of course, you can look at scouting, but again, the way they've changed scouting this year, this is something I warned about on Twitter when everyone was just praying and waiting and hoping, couldn't wait. I got to start my franchise. When's the new scouting coming out? And I said, hey, don't be in such a rush. There's no guarantee this is going to be better. And frankly, I don't think it's maybe, I think there's parts of it that are better, but I think overall as a whole, it's pretty much exactly the same experience, just with less to do, which can be good in parts, but also kind of just sad. Like, there's just really nothing to look at. Like, these guys have been, we're heavily scouting quarterbacks. Of course, I'm hoping to get Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, I think, in this next draft. And we are now 5 weeks into the season. I don't have a single report back. They're still at 20% complete. Like, what's my scout doing? Like, is he going to any games, anything? We don't have a single mock draft. I guess there's one. So one mock draft has been released. A lot of these come later on, but they're just, all it really does is just look at your top player that you have on, like, you could put like the worst punter as your favorite player on your favorite list, and it'll show you picking him like number 1 overall. It's just, I don't know, rushed. And again, these next franchise updates that people are working on, guys, don't hold your breath. Don't get overly excited about them. They're probably not going to be much to write home about, unfortunately. And again, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just being real. They have not shown us anything to have us believe anything else, right? So, but again, I'll look at scouting players, of course, weekly strategy stuff, which I've had a few questions today come in about that. Like, oh, like, for instance, I'm getting a lot of injuries. What do I do? Well, it's really important you go in here and you can't just keep running guys full pads every single week. Sometimes you need to go down a half pad. And on top middle, there you can see 100% fatigue. These guys are probably good to practice full pads. There's still a risk that you'll get an injury. But if that's kind of creeping below, I don't really go below like 99, 98. I'll start doing half pad workouts and that sort of thing. And it depends too on your season. If it's the last week of the year and I'm a playoff team just kind of resting starters, I'm not going to go full pads. And it's the opposite. As a bad team, like, I don't really care if anybody gets hurt the last week. I want to get that development, the XP, the extra XP. So again, that's what that plays into. So of course you can set those. You get little bonuses and some I guess pros and cons of each practice strategy that you pick. While you practice the same thing all week at practice or whatever it is, you only practice once a week. I don't know how they're framing it here. It looks like weekly strategies, so you're running the exact same practice all week, and that's fine. I don't really want to spend a ton of time tweaking practices. That's kind of boring. Yeah, so again, the rest is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, of course, managing staff, I'm not going to go through this. This isn't like a Madden tutorial. It's just more of like, what are some of the things that I look at in between weeks. I do spend some time going through. I'm pretty meticulous about my depth chart. And so I take a lot of screenshots each week of my depth chart. So when guys are hurt and guys come back, it's easy for me just to kind of plug guys back in. But again, always adjusting as players start to develop more. And I don't just go off of like a straight overall, because one guy might be an overall like a 71 as a run stuffing end or something. But if the defense more calls for like a speed rusher in that position, he's not a good fit for that. So I try to find guys that are better fits. Of course, not sacrificing too much of the overall, but again, just trying to find the best balance there. So, but yeah, that's about it, guys. That's basically how I go kind of just week to week. I mentioned at the end, I would talk a little bit about sliders. And again, I try to do everything I can just really based off of stats, right? I don't try to go too much off of feel. I mean, feel is just especially, and this is a compliment to the game, a lot changes week to week. And it's hard to get, even after 17 regular season games, that's still a pretty small sample size. And so it's going off of feel sometimes isn't going to work. Then again, going off of stats doesn't always work for the same reason, right? Small sample size. But Some of these things just haven't changed in this game for a number of years. And again, that's not a knock. That's okay. I think that's a compliment sometimes when you do find something that works well in gameplay, like MLB The Show. There's some sliders that I probably haven't touched in years because they haven't updated certain parts of the game, and that's okay because it's working really, really well. So it's not a big issue there. But I'll go in and again just kind of tweak some of the stuff. It may be different than what I have. That's perfectly fine. Penalty sliders don't really do a whole lot. To me, these are always like kind of just triggers. Like I kind of look at penalty sliders like this. This is on, and anything above this is also on. It doesn't matter what you put these at. It does not affect gameplay. You're never going to convince me of that. It might be a different story. I know some people with, like NCAA 14 are pretty sold that this activates different like animations and stuff. I don't know. I have never tested NCAA like that. What I do know is that player overall or even certain player attributes will affect certain animations. I would still bet money that NCAA also doesn't have animations that are impacted off of penalty sliders. That just sounds very tin hat theory kind of stuff, but I can assure you that they don't in Madden. I can 100% assure you. So these are here. I don't even know. I just put defensive pass interference at 99 just in the hopes that it'll help maybe limit defenders kind of going up for interceptions. Again, it probably doesn't do anything. It just makes me feel better. This is one of the only sliders, these two here, that aren't really kind of on-off switches. They will they actually kind of work properly. Like as you increase these will get called appropriately. But these ones here, it doesn't really matter. I mean, once you click 50 or above, it's pretty much the same thing. So, but yeah, and then again, just keeping a pulse. There's the slider app that I created where you can input your stats, I should say, and then it'll kind of spit out a recommended slider set for you. But yeah, that's really it, guys. So if you have questions, let me know in the comments. I can answer those. I'm on Twitter at MikeLow47. Always happy to answer questions. And the slider thread itself is up on Operation Sports under Madden, under sliders, and you can find more information there. So thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.